I've been inspecting cars for 19 years, not as a hobbyist. As a working mechanic who has pulled apart engines across 3 continents, who has stood inside Japanese service bays watching technicians work with a level of precision I genuinely did not believe existed until I saw it firsthand. And I need to tell you something that took me almost a decade to fully understand. The reason Japanese cars last longer than almost every other vehicle on the planet has almost nothing to do with the cars themselves. It has everything to do with a government inspection system that most people outside Japan have never heard of, a system so demanding, so deliberately punishing, that it accidentally forced Japanese automakers to engineer vehicles that could survive it. Not once, not at 3 years, but again and again for the entire life of the car. If you've ever wondered why a 1994 Toyota Land Cruiser with 400,000 miles still drives like it has 80,000 on it, if you've ever looked at a 22-year-old Honda with a clean undercarriage and asked yourself how that's possible, the answer is sitting in a Japanese government regulation most people outside Japan can't even pronounce. Before we go further, if this kind of information is useful to you, hit subscribe. What I put out here is the kind of thing they don't teach in certification courses. It's what you absorb after 2 decades of getting your hands dirty and asking the right questions to the right people. The system is called Shaken, written in Japanese as Chinese letter, and it is the single most consequential vehicle regulation ever created by any government on Earth, not because it is the strictest in absolute terms, but because of what it demanded from the companies building the vehicles that would be submitted to it repeatedly, for decades with no exit. Here's what nobody tells you about how it started. When the Japanese government introduced mandatory vehicle inspections in 1951, they were not trying to create the most reliable car culture in history. They were trying to remove dangerous vehicles from roads still recovering from wartime damage, roads shared by ox carts, military surplus trucks, and the earliest post-war passenger vehicles. The inspection was a basic safety filter, something to catch the worst of the worst. What happened instead is one of the most remarkable unintended consequences in industrial history. The Japanese government kept tightening the standards, and every time they did, the automakers had 2 choices: build vehicles that scraped through Shaken by the minimum margin, cheap to manufacture, acceptable to inspectors but degrading rapidly between cycles, or build vehicles so over-engineered that Shaken was never a significant threat. Toyota chose the second path. Honda chose the second path. Nissan, Mazda, Subaru, they all eventually chose the second path, not out of noble intent, out of economic survival, because a car that fails Shaken and cannot be re-registered is effectively worthless. And in a country where Shaken compliance costs can reach the equivalent of $3,000 or more depending on the vehicle, a reputation for failing was a reputation for financial ruin. So they built vehicles that couldn't fail, and in doing so, they accidentally built the most reliable vehicles in automotive history. 1. What Shaken actually demands, and why it's nothing like a Western inspection. In the United States, a vehicle inspection is what I'd call a baseline filter. You show up, a technician checks that your lights work, your brakes stop you within an acceptable distance, your emissions aren't egregious, and your tires aren't completely bald. The whole thing takes 20 minutes. The failure rate in most American states hovers between 8 and 15%. Most of those failures are minor. Most of those people drive away having spent $200 or less to fix whatever triggered the flag. In Japan, the baseline is not the baseline. It's the floor, and the floor is 2 stories below where the serious evaluation begins. The Japanese Shaken inspection is a multi-point evaluation conducted at government train stations or certified garages operating under the same standardized protocol. The vehicle is assessed on over 50 individual checkpoints across every major system. Braking force is measured on all 4 wheels simultaneously and must meet specified minimums on both axles. Headlight alignment is measured to millimeter precision. A headlight that is 2 degrees off axis fails outright. Exhaust emissions are measured under load conditions, not just at idle. Suspension components are assessed for play, wear, and deflection within tight tolerances. Steering response, horn function, seat belt condition, all measured, all documentable, all capable of failing the vehicle. But here's what makes it categorically different from anything in the West. Shaken is not a snapshot inspection. It is a deterioration inspection. The evaluators are not just asking whether your car is acceptable today. They are looking for evidence of how fast your car is degrading, because the inspection cycle means they will see it again in 2 years and the vehicle must still pass then. Rust is not cosmetic under Shaken standards. Active corrosion compromising frame rails, subframes, or floor pans is an automatic failure, not a repair advisory, a failure. And in Japan, where coastal humidity creates aggressive corrosion conditions in cities like Tokyo and Osaka, This single requirement alone transformed how Japanese manufacturers approached metal treatment decades before European or American manufacturers took the problem seriously. The cost structure compounds the pressure. For a standard passenger vehicle, government fees alone run to approximately $500 to $700. Add inspection labor and any required repairs, and you're looking at $1,500 to $3,000 for a vehicle needing meaningful work. For a vehicle needing significant structural attention, the cost of compliance can exceed the vehicle's market value entirely. This creates what Japanese owners call the shaken cliff, the point at which maintaining a vehicle through another inspection cycle costs more than the vehicle is worth. At that point, most Japanese owners scrap the vehicle. The vehicles that survive multiple shaken cycles are not the ones built to minimum standard. They are the ones built so far above minimum standard that the shaken evaluators have nothing to find. 2. The corrosion standard that changed how every Toyota was built. In 1968, the Japanese government added mandatory undercarriage inspection to shaken. This sounds minor. It was not minor. It forced Japanese manufacturers to solve a problem that their European and American counterparts spent the next 30 years pretending didn't exist. Before 1968, rust proofing on Japanese passenger vehicles was comparable to what American manufacturers were doing: minimal. A basic primer coat, a top coat, and the hope that corrosion wouldn't become visible before the owner stopped caring. After 1968, every vehicle submitted to shaken had its undercarriage physically examined by an inspector authorized to fail the vehicle if corrosion was compromising structural integrity. Active scale corrosion on subframe mounting points within 15 years of manufacture was an automatic failure. Toyota's engineers ran the numbers. A vehicle failing shaken at 8 to 10 years of age would generate warranty reputation damage, owner lawsuits, and regulatory scrutiny that could threaten the entire product line. The solution was straightforward and expensive. They tripled the corrosion protection specification on every structural component. Cavity wax was injected into enclosed body sections. Underbody coating thickness increased from approximately 1 mm to 3 mm on high-exposure surfaces. Weld seams on subframes and floor pans were sealed with rubberized compound at the factory level. Frame rails on utility vehicles like the Land Cruiser received a hot-dip galvanizing process that entombed the steel in zinc, the same process used on industrial bridge components. The result was invisible to buyers. It added approximately $200 per vehicle in manufacturing cost. And it is the reason a 1985 Toyota Hilux found in a dry climate can be lifted on a lift today and show a frame that looks, under careful examination, like it left the factory within the last decade. American manufacturers did not face this pressure. Ford trucks from the same era had frame corrosion problems so severe the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration eventually launched multiple investigations. Not because American engineers were less capable, because they were not operating under a system that punished ignoring the long game. 3. The brake tolerance that no American manufacturer would have accepted voluntarily. Shaken's brake testing is worth understanding specifically because it is not the kind of test Western systems run. In the United States, a brake inspection typically involves visual examination of rotor surface and pad thickness, combined with a basic road test. There is no measurement of left-to-right brake force differential. There is no measurement of individual wheel braking efficiency expressed as a percentage of vehicle weight. Shaken measures all of this, on each axle separately with minimum thresholds. Front axle braking force must achieve at least 50% of the front axle load. Rear axle braking force must achieve at least 20% of the rear axle load. These are load cell measurements on a dynamometer that produce a specific number, not a visual impression, not a field test. Left-to-right differential, the difference in braking force between the left and right wheels on the same axle, must not exceed 8% of total axle braking force. A vehicle with a slightly seized caliper on the left front, or a partially collapsed brake hose on the right rear, shows up on this test as a measurable differential before it creates any symptomatic behavior the driver can feel. Japanese brake component manufacturers, supplying original equipment to Toyota and Honda for generations, have been building to a specification that assumes this level of measurement. The internal quality tolerances on Toyota-branded brake calipers are significantly tighter than equivalent specifications from American OEM suppliers. I have measured braking force on well-maintained 200,000-mile Toyota Camrys that exceed shaken minimums by margins I have never seen on equivalent mileage American vehicles from the same era. The system degraded less because it was built to degrade less. because in Japan, the cost of failing that specific measurement was immediate, financial, and public. 4. The suspension wear limit that forced Toyota to engineer joints for 300,000 miles. In Western inspections, suspension wear assessment is largely visual and tactile. A technician grabs a wheel and applies lateral force looking for visible play in ball joints and tie rod ends. The threshold is descriptive, excessive play rather than measured. Shaken operates from a measured standard. Ball joint axial play must not exceed 1 mm for most passenger vehicles. Tie rod end lateral play must not exceed 1.5 mm. These measurements are taken with precision gauges, not by feel. 1 millimeter of axial play in a ball joint does not create handling problems. You cannot feel it from the driver's seat. The vehicle does not pull. The steering does not wander. The only way to find it is to measure it. What this means is that Japanese vehicles are being inspected to tolerances tighter than the driver can perceive, and failing if components fall below those tolerances. The manufacturers who wanted to avoid those failures engineered ball joints and tie rod ends to last longer, to seal better, and to resist the contamination that accelerates wear. I have measured ball joint play on a 2002 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles that was maintained by a Japanese owner for the first 12 years of its life, meaning it went through Shaken 6 times before being exported. The lower ball joint axial play was 0.6 mm. The Shaken tolerance is 1 mm. The joint passed at 187,000 miles. The cost implication: a Toyota ball joint replacement runs approximately $120 to $180 per side. A steering rebuild prompted by a ball joint that was never measured until something catastrophic forced the issue can run $600 to $900 before additional suspension damage is addressed. The precision standard doesn't cost more, it costs less, over time. 5. The fluid inspection that created Japan's obsessive maintenance culture. During a certified Shaken inspection, the following fluids are checked: engine oil condition and level, coolant concentration, brake fluid hygroscopic saturation, power steering fluid, and on automatic transmission vehicles, transmission fluid condition. The transmission fluid check is the one that matters most for long-term reliability outcomes. Japanese Shaken inspectors are trained to recognize the visual and olfactory characteristics of degraded automatic transmission fluid. Dark coloration, particulate suspension, and the burnt odor that indicates thermal breakdown are documented during the inspection. A vehicle presenting with severely degraded fluid may not fail Shaken outright, but the inspector documents it. In certified inspection, shops universally recommend correction before completing certification. The cultural effect of this single element, accumulated over 7 decades of Shaken history, has been to normalize transmission fluid changes in Japan in a way that has never occurred in the United States. American transmission fluid change intervals range from 60,000 miles to the genuinely absurd claim of lifetime fluid on certain designs. Lifetime fluid, in engineering terms, means fluid that lasts the life of the transmission, not the life of the vehicle. The transmission is treated as a consumable. You drive it until it fails, then you replace it. In Japan, the transmission fluid change interval on most automatic vehicles is 30,000 to 40,000 kilometers, approximately 18,500 to 25,000 miles. Not because a regulation specifically mandates it, because the cultural expectation established through Shaken is that a vehicle presenting with dark transmission fluid is a neglected vehicle, and a neglected vehicle is a vehicle that will cost you money. Drain and fill, not a flush. Drain and fill with genuine Toyota World Standard fluid every 25,000 miles. The cost is $80 to $130 at an independent shop. The cost of a Toyota automatic transmission replacement on a Camry or Avalon is $2,800 to $4,500. The math is not complicated. The maintenance culture that Shaken created in Japan is simply doing the math at the population level. If you want to apply this to your own vehicle, I've put together a complete Japanese standard maintenance schedule for Toyota and Lexus vehicles. Every fluid, every interval, specific OEM fluid specifications, organized by mileage from 15,000 through 200,000 miles. It covers the transmission interval, the brake fluid replacement cycle, the coolant timing. The link is in the description, it's free. 6. The emissions standard that launched Toyota's hybrid program 20 years early. The conventional narrative is that Toyota built the Prius because they were visionary environmentalists who saw the future of electrification before anyone else. That narrative is convenient. It is also incomplete in ways that matter. In the mid-1990s, Japan's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism announced that exhaust emissions thresholds would be tightened dramatically over the following decade. The specific targets for hydrocarbon and nitrogen oxide emissions for vehicles passing Shaken in the 2005 to 2010 window represented reductions of approximately 70% from existing standards. 70%. At existing engine technology trajectories, meeting those standards on conventional engines required either direct injection precision that would add significant cost per vehicle or supplementary electric drive that could eliminate cold start emissions entirely. Toyota ran both programs simultaneously. The Prius was not a gamble on a visionary future. It was an insurance policy against a regulatory standard that Toyota's engineers calculated could not be met with conventional technology alone within the Shaken framework. The Prius launched in Japan in December 1997. It met the projected 2005 Shaken emissions thresholds on the day it launched, 8 years early. That margin was not accident. It was engineering precision aimed at a regulatory target that nobody outside Japan was taking seriously. The American and European automakers who dismissed hybrid technology in the late 1990s were not operating under the same regulatory pressure. Nobody was forcing precision. Shaken was forcing precision. And the companies that built their engineering programs around passing Shaken produced vehicles that led global quality rankings for the following 30 years. 7. The documentation standard that made Japanese maintenance history traceable. Shaken creates documentation. Legally verifiable, officially stamped documentation of every inspection, every failure, every repair, every system assessment across the entire service life of the vehicle. A Japanese vehicle with complete Shaken history called the Shaken Show has an objectively verifiable maintenance record, every inspection result, every item requiring attention, every repair performed, every official certification that the vehicle met all standards at the time, every time at every inspection. This document is worth money in the Japanese used vehicle market. A vehicle presented for auction with complete Shaken history commands a premium of 15% to 25% over an equivalent vehicle with incomplete history. The premium reflects something real. A complete Shaken history is evidence that the vehicle was maintained to a government-verified standard, not just serviced, verified. The downstream effect on maintenance behavior is compounding. Because Shaken documentation has monetary value, because an owner who keeps complete documentation can demonstrably recover that investment in resale premium, Japanese owners have a direct financial incentive to maintain their vehicles beyond mere reliability concern. The documentation itself is an asset. American vehicle maintenance records have no equivalent verifiable standard. A service record from a quick-lube chain cannot be cross-referenced against a government certification. In Japan, the Shaken Show confirms everything it covers. This created a documentation culture that reinforced maintenance discipline across 3 generations of vehicle owners. 8. The reinspection standard that created Toyota's over-engineering philosophy. Here is the part that most people who study Japanese automotive quality miss entirely. They focus on the initial Shaken inspection. They do not focus on what happens when a vehicle returns to Shaken in 2 years, then 2 years again, then 2 years again. A vehicle that passes Shaken at 3 years of age must pass at 5 years, then at 7, then at 9, then every 2 years thereafter for as long as the owner operates it. The engineering implication of this is different from the implication of a single initial inspection. A one-time inspection rewards building to minimum standard. A recurring inspection on a deterioration-based measurement system rewards building components that deteriorate slowly. These are fundamentally different design targets. Toyota's engineers, designing to pass repeated Shaken evaluations at 2-year intervals, were solving a different mathematical problem than American engineers designing to achieve acceptable initial quality metrics. They were designing for the rate of change, the slope of the degradation curve, not just the starting point. The practical output of optimizing for degradation rate, a vehicle at 100,000 miles that is still measurably closer to its original specification than a vehicle designed to achieve high initial quality scores without attention to how fast those scores fall. This is why a well-maintained Toyota at 100,000 miles drives better than a competitive American vehicle at 80,000. Not magic. The mathematical outcome of a different engineering optimization target. 9. The Shaken Cliff and why it produced a used car market unlike anything on Earth. When a Japanese owner reaches the shaken cliff, the vehicle is not simply sold to a private buyer for parts. The Japanese vehicle disposal system routes most of these vehicles through a remarkably organized auction and export process. Japanese auto auctions, the USS, TAA, JU, and other major networks assess every vehicle against a standardized condition grading scale from 1 to 5, with subgrades for interior and exterior condition. Every visible defect, every mechanical symptom, every available maintenance record is documented. Vehicles grading at 3.5, 4, and 4.5, excellent to near-perfect condition with documented histories, are aggressively purchased by export buyers from the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Kenya, Uganda, Pakistan, the UAE, and dozens of other markets that permit right-hand drive imports. These are not old cars by any reasonable standard. A Japanese domestic market vehicle at 10 years of age that has passed 5 shaken inspections has been inspected to a level of thoroughness that most American vehicles never experience in their entire service lives. The ball joints are within tolerance. The brakes have documented stopping force. The transmission fluid has been changed on Japanese intervals. And these vehicles, exported from a system that accidentally created the most rigorous vehicle maintenance culture on Earth, then accumulate another 150,000 to 200,000 miles in their destination countries, often without a single major mechanical failure. I have personally inspected 30-year-old Land Cruiser Prado models in New Zealand exported from Japan with full shaken documentation, running without engine rebuilds past 450,000 total kilometers. These are not exceptional vehicles. They are the predictable output of a system that demanded exceptional care. Here is what you now understand that most people driving Japanese cars in America, Australia, and Europe do not know. The Toyota that starts at 300,000 miles, the Honda that never rusts, the Lexus transmission that shifts clean at 200,000. These are not miracles, they are not luck. They are the direct and measurable output of a government inspection system that created financial consequences for building cars that degraded. And in response to those consequences, Japanese manufacturers built cars that didn't. Shaken forced ball joints that held to within 1 millimeter of play for 150,000 miles. It forced undercoatings that sealed frames against 30 years of coastal humidity. It forced fluid change intervals that treated the transmission as a precision instrument rather than a throwaway component. It forced brake systems built to a load cell standard rather than a field test. And it did all of this not through engineering inspiration, but through the most basic mechanism available. It made failure expensive. You can apply every lesson in this video to your own vehicle right now. The transmission fluid interval is the single highest return maintenance decision available to any automatic transmission owner. $120 every 25,000 miles prevents a $4,000 repair with near certainty over 200,000 miles. The brake fluid change, which Shaken demands every 2 years without exception, costs $80 to $120 and prevents the internal corrosion that causes caliper seizure, which runs $600 to $900 per axle to correct. The ball joint inspection, conducted with a dial indicator rather than a handfeel, costs $40 to $60 as a standalone diagnostic and catches a $180 repair before it becomes a $900 repair. Maintain it like the system that produced the most reliable cars in history demanded, or maintain it like a system that has never measured your ball joint play and never will. The choice is yours. Drop a comment telling me what mileage your vehicle is at right now and which of these maintenance items you're adding to your schedule first. I read every one. In next video, I'm going inside a Japanese Shaken certified inspection bay with a camera, an interpreter, and a dial indicator. You're going to watch a technician measure wheel bearing play on a 15-year-old Toyota Alphard in real time, see exactly what that measurement finds, and see what it costs to fix before it costs 5 times as much later. Don't miss it.